Welcome to the Tilted Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Tina Twomey, psychotherapist and facilitator with loads of experience behind her around the feeling of not being good enough and what her experiences of it, both personally and professionally, and what she does around that helps herself and helps others, and how we might be able to benefit from it. So welcome to the Tilted Podcast. You're about to hear from Tina Twomey. Hi Tina, how are you?
Hi, Sheila.
You're a little bit nervous, are you?
I'm very nervous, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not good with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. That will feed in nicely to the topic today. So when I invited you on to speak, I kept it really broad, like I do with everyone. And I said, talk about something that you feel passionate about. I think it's really important for listeners to hear about. Okay.
Yeah.
And if I'm correct, you decided something around this feeling of not being good enough. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So will you tell me a little bit about where you're coming from with that? Why that topic? And we'll go from there.
I suppose for me, like on a personal level, like it's like even doing this, I was like, Jesus, am I good enough? Will I have anything to say? Will I look some stuff up about not being good enough? You know, like give me some material to use. So I had to kind of calm myself down and be like, Tina, you're just talking about your experience, both personally and professionally. You know, and I suppose even on a professional level, you know, a lot of my clients, when you kind of come down to it and the core of it, it really comes back to that not being good enough. You know, it really, really does, which kind of, for me, when I'm sitting with somebody, it touches off my own stuff as well, because that's something I have struggled with probably my whole life. And then to sit opposite somebody and to see that struggle is so real for a lot of people, you know, in different variations and in different areas maybe, but really when you boil it down, there is that kind of undercurrent of not feeling good enough, you know, not enough. So I suppose that's why for me it's really kind of at the forefront of my mind, and you know, again, like both personally and professionally, really.
And when you say that feeling you're not good enough, can you give me some examples of what that might look like? So in case somebody doesn't resonate naturally with that term, how would that show up in our lives? How would you know that that's what's happening for you?
I suppose it kind of, my experience is it kind of comes out in a lot of different ways, you know, work related, you know, like not applying for jobs, delaying applications for jobs. When you're in a job, you know, not going for that promotion, you know, not doing certain tasks, you know, kind of passing them off. You know, taking criticism nearly too easily from people, you know, believing it, you know, rather than being able to stand your ground and fight your corner and kind of be able to say, well, actually, that's not the case, or could we look at it a different way, you know, different things like that. In terms of work, relationships, you know, I see it all the time, you know, people thinking like, I suppose, keeping their options limited, you know, not going after maybe somebody they might like and playing it safe, you know, and ending up in relationships maybe that aren't good for them, you know, because they actually don't feel inherently like they're worth more, accepting unacceptable behavior, you know, things like that, you know, and like that doesn't even have to be intimate relationships, you know, that can be within a family, you know, that can be with colleagues, again, in terms of work, it can be in friendships, you know, different stuff like that. And I think generally, like, I suppose, you know, Sheila, one kind of place we see it all the time is it's definitely there with women, you know, and how they look, you know, and I suppose, you know what, when I say it, even with just women, you see it a lot more with men nowadays. You know, I suppose there's this big emphasis on how we look, you know, whether that's in fitness, what size we are, you know, and even that's something, and I'm relatively small, but that's something I can struggle with, you know, that I don't have that perfect shape, you know, that I've got a couple of little edges on me, you know, little love handles or stuff like that, you know. But I think as a society, we actually struggle with that actual going around with not good enough. We're always on that next piece to how can I improve myself, and not necessarily in a healthy way.
Yeah, and it does. I suppose what I'm thinking is I'm seeing a lot of it in terms of being channeled to healthy activities, you know, a lot of health kicks actually being about not feeling adequate if we didn't do it. A lot of education. I'm seeing it a lot more now that adult education is so common. People almost looking for courses to be good enough to do what they're already doing.
Yeah.
I'm bringing up, the term imposter syndrome. I'm seeing like that's something that comes up in my work a lot, but people who've already succeeded somehow discounting their success, and you're like,
yeah.
So
sure.
I suppose, coming from a therapy background, what I'm wondering is, do you have a sense of where that originates from? Because from a coaching perspective, we're looking at how to work with it and how to move forward. But I know that in therapy, there is an importance placed on where it emerged and grew from. Do you have a sense of what that's about, where it's coming from for people? And obviously, in general, you can't talk about individuals.
Yeah, so I suppose this is kind of your typical answer, especially in therapy. Some people kind of come, and I've done this in therapy. It's like, why are we talking about my family? Why are we going back to mom or dad or those relationships? And the reality is, when we look at it, and in my work with a lot of people, it goes back to that. It goes back to those early relationships, and like if you look at Rogers' conditions of work, that's it, really. Because if we're at home and I suppose they are the most fundamental relationships. We kind of base a lot of our future relationships off our early relationships. So if we're fighting to be worth something from a very young age at home, how do we stand a chance when we get older? Because we're not quite sure. So if we're the good child, or if we're the academic child, or if we're the sports child, or if we're the fixer, the one that's always reliable, dependable. So like it can go back to that, but then we kind of base how we are in the world off those early kind of perceptions, assumptions, kind of roles that we've been given. We develop these rules as kids, about how we should be in the world to be a good person or to get what we need. And then we spend our lives trying to meet those, and I suppose, again, even from my own personal experience and from those that I've worked with, we find out when we're a little bit older that, we've kind of outworn those old ways of managing, that like something might have worked. I suppose, let me give you an example, maybe. So if we're kind of the sporty child, and if we're kind of applauded and like given a lot of attention for being good at sports and for achieving, and then we get to 18 or 19 and we realize, actually, I don't really want to play sport. That's not really where I feel I want to be. I don't even like that sport, that I've just spent 10 years playing. Can I do something different? But the sense of failure or the sense of guilt or shame that comes then with trying to move away from that, really affects people, because then they're kind of going around with this sense of like, well, I've just spent all this time, prepping to do something, and now I don't even want to do that. What am I supposed to do? Or even I've seen with some that it's kind of the messages that we were given in maybe that area, it doesn't actually translate into a different area. So I suppose, like, and I don't know why I'm going to sports, but that's kind of at the forefront for me now. But like, that sports is, if you keep trying, if you keep moving, if you put in enough effort, you'll get there. And so then people, whether it's in relationships or in their lives, keep putting in all this effort, but they're not getting the results that they're looking for. And it's how does that make sense? And then they feel like a failure as a result, that they're doing something wrong, when actually it's just that those rules don't apply to this new situation or to a different situation. Does that make sense?
Oh, completely. So like, we learn how to get through and to do well at something. I actually heard someone recently say, go hard or go home, that gym saying.
Yeah,
so it's just, you
exactly,
talk about the sports. And a therapist took it on as a very interesting approach. And she had to reframe it, because she's like, you can't go hard or go home in therapy. You have to go soft and be consistent.
Exactly.
So sometimes, and it's like, sorry, go on.
No, it's like, people assume, like, it's this thing of like, if you walk into a gym first day and you've never gone to the gym, you can't know how to use all the machines, and you can't have that muscle mass, and you can't be 6 months from where you are. You can only be where you are learning at the start. But it's like, we go in with this expectation of, I should be 6 months ahead of myself. That's where I need to be. But the hard work and the frustrations and the disappointments that it takes to get there, you know, and the discipline, you know, it's almost like that's missed, and it's like I expect the results from there now. You know what I mean?
And I was just thinking, it's often when people come in for coaching, they're saying things like, I should know this, or that's simple, why didn't I know this? And I'm like, well, like it's kind of not your work unless somebody's helped you develop it. I wouldn't have known it if I didn't start off by not knowing it.
We think we should know,
you know,
without ever knowing. And it's amazing.
As if there's something wrong if we have to go out and learn. So I think around the personal development stuff, it's very easy to think, because, and we use the term soft skills all the time, that somehow it's going to, it should be easy, and we should already have it, and should, and if we don't, something's wrong. But the truth is, we only have what we were given, and there's areas in our life we weren't given skills in. It's that simple. And it's up to us whether we develop those or not. And you were given some skills, whatever they were, and you haven't been given other ones. But you can't have what you don't have. You can't be 6 months along. You have to be where you are.
Exactly.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense. What I'm thinking now is around, if somebody's sitting listening to this now and they're saying, okay, that's grand, I get it. What do I do? Where do you think someone can start if they're sitting listening and they're thinking, I don't know where to start with this? What would be your kind of 3 pieces of advice or tips or suggestions to give someone a place to start?
Yeah. I suppose the word compassion is thrown around quite a lot and stuff like that, but I really do believe in having a compassionate approach to yourself with things, and being realistic, you know, and sometimes we need support with that. You know, because we might not automatically be compassionate with ourselves. So we might need another person to mirror compassion back to us. You know, that's what I find a lot with clients, is that when I'm working with somebody, you know, I mention compassion and stuff, and it's thrown around by people, and we're meant to automatically even know what a compassionate approach is. Like, this is another piece. It's like, why can't I be compassionate to myself? But I really think being able to sit with somebody, and sometimes that's a therapist, sometimes that's a coach, you know, sometimes that's a good friend, you know, and being able to talk honestly about where you're at, you know, and being able to get some good feedback around, is that a realistic expectation of yourself, of the situation, you know, and being able to get maybe some guidance and support around, well, what can I do next? So I suppose a realistic, compassionate approach with support, if that can be my point. Yeah, I really think that's the way to go.
Yeah, and I think, so realistic, I think, is super important, because often people come to me with goals, and it's not that they're unrealistic for them, as in that this person can never achieve it, but maybe they're not, what they're kind of basing these ideas off aren't realistic. They're versions of themselves, or their rules. Compassionate, you're right, we throw the word around, but we don't necessarily practice it. So I really hear
know
that.
What it means.
Or what it looks like in our personal life. Like, what does compassion actually look like for me? And then I love the support one. I suppose I stand over, if you're trying to make any changes that you don't have the skills for, you need to work with someone who can help you develop the skills. Whether that's that you talk to, and some friends are great to talk to because they are insightful, and some friends aren't, because that's not their skill, you know.
Exactly.
But I do think, and I suppose I wouldn't be in this work and you wouldn't be in your work if we didn't believe that professional support was key.
Exactly.
And I suppose from my point of view, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I'm sure won't be where I'm going to be in 10 years without professional support.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we're very easy to, as professionals, to kind of say, so support networks are really important, but sometimes we have to learn the skills to be able to engage with our networks in that way.
For sure.
Yeah. So I hear the personal supports, but professional as well.
Yeah. And I suppose realizing that it's okay to ask for help. I think in this country in particular, we have a real issue with needing help or support or guidance. Like, it's that thing of, we think we should know, you know, or that it's nearly a weakness to ask for help or support, you know, when actually as humanity, we need each other, you know, like mental health is dependent on connection, you know, with each other, you know. So I think, you know, that it's okay to actually seek out support, you know, whether that's professional or, you know, friendships. And I think you're right about that, you know, sometimes we need to make sure that the person that we're going to is the right person for what we need at that time, you know. because sometimes a friend might be in a different place or just have a different kind of value system, you know, and it can nearly come out worse for us in the end.
And I think there's something about when we're going for support from friends that we are still making sure that the relationship is reciprocal, because sometimes what can happen is we can get into such a needy place that we are opting out of counselling, we're opting out of coaching, we're opting out of support groups, and we're using friendships. We're not being supported by them, we're actually using them to some degree. So I think that to ensure that we are reciprocal in our friendships when we get support, we need to make sure that we're actually taking responsibility for our needs where they belong. If a professional intervention is needed, friends can't give us that, although friends can give us really good friendships that are nourishing and supportive, and they can't do work with us that a professional can. Even if your friend is a professional, especially if your friend is a professional, because the relationship becomes uneven and it's not reciprocal.
And it changes the dynamic automatically, you know. It really does.
Okay.
So,
So Tina, thank you. It was great having you. I'm going to pop your details below in all of the links. I still haven't got the words right for these things. And if anybody wants to get in contact with you, are you happy to have a conversation with them before they work with you or anything like that, just to have a chat?
I am, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
So, brilliant. So I'll pop in your LinkedIn details and they can follow up with you directly if anybody has questions. Is that okay?
Brilliant.
Thanks a million, Tina. I appreciate that.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.